Today, we have evolved far beyond trying to understand each and every nuance of the school education system, be it concerned with the child's psychology, be it concerned with how a school is run, be it concerned with the various facets of our education system, and of course, the importance of digital education given the current pandemic scenario. Today, we look at school transfers. Parents in transferable jobs, in the armed forces, in PSUs, often get moved from city to city, from town to town. And what is often part of that move is the child also tagging along to a different place. Now, beyond the geography of the place, this means the child also has to make new friends, get accustomed to a new schooling system, and meet new teachers, learn things in a new way. Today, we are going to look at the various facets of school transfers for students. Before we do that, what we'll do is we'll take a short look at one of the notebook videos. We at Notebook, as you know, are an edtech brand. We make short, customized videos for the curriculum that teachers find helpful in beginning their lessons. These short videos can be played before a class is taken either online or offline, and students can then have access to the same videos on their personal devices, be it a smartphone or a laptop, from their homes months later when they need to revise for an exam. Abhishek, if you could please roll the video.
Hello students, welcome to Notebook. On May 4th, 2019, Chinese President Xi Jinping celebrated the fierce patriotism of the students and demonstrators of the countrywide protests, which had started on the 4th of May 1919 in Tiananmen Square in Beijing. The students and protesters had believed that the government had no self-respect as it was selling out China to foreign powers. They resented Japanese occupation of Shandong in China. The students' movement had turned violent and some were arrested as a result. China's current strict regime would never have allowed student protests to take the massive form it took in 1919. Last year, Xi Jinping still honored the patriotism and vigor of the students which had happened 100 years back. Physician, philosopher and politician Sun Yat-sen was engaged in decade-long rebellions till the overthrow of the Qing dynasty through the Xinhai Revolution. Warlordism or feudalism was still prevalent in China around this time, and many wanted a democratic government free from foreign control and feudal authority. China had come in contact with the West when trade links had opened up between China and Britain and other countries. They were influenced by Western philosophy and thought that Mr. Science and Mr. Democracy could save them from subjugation to foreign powers, bring national unity, and help them become a sovereign nation. The people who wanted a democratic and progressive China were also influenced by past king reformers like Kang Youwei and Liang Qichao. These reformers
Ladies and
had
gentlemen, that
campaigned.
was a short clip from one of the Notebook videos. Today, the platform has more than 10,000 videos, which are of use to nearly 1.5 million students across country and abroad who are using Notebook now. I would urge all of you to go over to our website or install our mobile apps to have a look yourself. With that, ladies and gentlemen, it is now time to introduce our first speaker for the day. Our first speaker today is Mr. Phillip Barrett. Mr. Barrett retired as a deputy headmaster from the illustrious Doon School in Dehradun after 44 years of service in education. He served the Doon School as housemaster, head of department, dean of student welfare, dean of activity headmaster with great distinction. He also carried out a visioning exercise for the Doon School in the year 2011 through an in-depth study of a number of British public schools and various schools in the US. He also qualified as a leadership trainer at Wellington College, UK in 2000. He is also an athlete, an adventurer, and a naturalist. And we are particularly happy to have him with us today. Last time we were at a webinar, I told you that he was grappling with personal issues and he was not feeling well. Today, I am so very happy to announce that he has finally defeated COVID-19. He's feeling better as he's recovering, and he's here with us today. Sir, so happy to have you here with us today. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Shubhayu. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes. So, Shubhayu, thank you very much.
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
To the entire team at Calcutta for your prayers and good wishes. I'm feeling like almost human again after about 10 days. So, and also a very good evening to the other panelists. My friend Meeta is on the panel today. I'm very happy.
Yeah, hi.
And also our esteemed guests who've tuned in. School transfers. The grass on the other side always looks greener. So goes the age-old saying. What we don't have, we want, and what we have, we do not value. My father was an army officer, and so every 3 years, we all had to pack up and move. When one was young, this was all very exciting because we loved the packing and the labeling of the crates and boxes, and we looked forward to the long railway journeys across India that we kept crisscrossing the subcontinent ever so often. And we got to see the entire country, which in a way was an education in itself. We learned to pull up our roots and move, make new friends, say goodbye to old ones. And I thought this was all very great fun. However, we often missed our examinations, which was even better. As I got older and moved to senior school, I somehow believed that this was not going to be to my advantage anymore. And what we missed out on these moves was the lack of stability, lack of familiarity of that one school, the same friends, the same teachers. And after a time, I dreamt of staying in one place. And we got tired of living like nomads. Thus, when I moved, while I moved 7 schools in my childhood, my children only had 2 schools, the primary school and their secondary school. So I provided for them the stability I failed to get. In fact, the biggest shock for me was when my father was transferred across the country in my very last year at school. And so that college life that I looked forward to with my old school buddies was shattered. Once again, a new college, another state, another dialect, another vernacular, and a fresh start from being a nobody once again, trying to make it to the cricket team again. It takes years to be known in school, to qualify for teams, but then one has to move and start from scratch again. Nobody knows you in your new school. Surprisingly, what we missed the most was leaving our faithful domestic helping hands, the cooks and the gardeners behind, as they had become a part of our families. My heart goes out to parents who are in government jobs and who get transferred and who have to go through the efforts of finding new schools for their wards. It is a nightmare, especially in big cities. And parents will do anything to get a good school, even to contribute to that dubious building fund and make under-the-counter payments. The perks of being a schoolmaster was that my children got education wherever I worked. And this was an envy to many of my corporate friends. Looking at it from the parents' point of view, parents only had a few options. One, they either sent their children to a residential school, but many parents may not have wanted to send their children so far away. Others may not have been able to afford the fees. Second, they took their children along with them wherever they moved, and they looked at the brighter side of things like new travel, new learning, new friends, etc. Third, some had the option of moving to their ancestral town or to leave their children with their grandparents. And the fourth, of course, was homeschooling. Now, homeschooling is not fully understood in India, but this is the way of the future. And Notebook has shown the way forward is possible. Self-study online is possible. You can sit for assessments later. One can learn at one's own pace, do one's own subjects, and not be tied down to learning in a school. Now, the second the second option may look easy, but it involves trying to find new schools every three years. And in the 60s, things were much easier. But as schools did not have a quota reserved for government servants, being a Christian, I had the added advantage of getting into a Catholic or a Protestant institution quite easily. Now, the boards were another problem. In those days, all good schools offered the senior Cambridge exam. and which eventually turned into the ICSE in 1970. Today, there are a multiple number of boards, including the IGCSE and IB. And it is one thing to get a school, but it is completely another thing to make sure that your child moves to similar boards. Another way schools make it more difficult for these distraught parents is by demanding that unnecessary paperwork, the transfer certificate, the migration certificate, the character certificate, and all these things are mandatory, of course, but only after class 5. So now you have army schools, you have army public schools, Air Force schools, Sanskriti schools for people like the IAS and government servants, the naval schools, the police schools, the central schools, the Kendriya Vidyalayas, which will all accept students transferring if the correct documents are provided. All that is needed are those paper requirements I had mentioned earlier, and the fact that your father works in the government. But problems generally occurred when the father and mother were posted mid-year through the year, before the child could sit for the annual exams. Now, does the child lose a complete year? Does he get promoted to the next class? Both are, in my view, bothersome and even unsettling. Another problem arose in the third language department and Hindi. When a kid moved from South India to North India, the Hindi levels were phenomenally higher. And these southern children could not cope with the language. And vice versa, when a northern child moved to the south, he might have to learn another language. So as I moved across the length and breadth of India, I had to do Marathi in Pune, Sanskrit in Agra, French in Assam. On the whole, when children are young and frequent movement is on the cards, this may seem exciting, but it leaves the students insecure and unsettled. Again, it depends a lot on the child and his upbringing. On the whole, we army and service children were extremely hardy, resilient, and we could adapt by and large. But the timid ones are the ones that suffer, especially if they have been doing well in their previous schools and suddenly find themselves struggling in their new environment. And there are a host of psychological issues that could crop up as children face when they settle in new places. There is bullying, cyberbullying, teasing, being ostracized, being called names. And thankfully, today's schools have counseling cells, which we didn't have. I have known children to suffer serious bulimia and anorexia problems when they change their school. Some become very rebellious, some get very withdrawn. Now, just having one's parents relocate because of government servant is not the only reason why children might want to transfer schools. Sometimes a child might want to change a board because, as I mentioned in the previous webinar, parents do feel that the CBSE for science is better preparation for competitive exams. So you might want to change the school within a city, even though your father is not being transferred. Another reason to change is just to a new location. We have this concept in Delhi called the neighborhood school. So if you move your residence, you might have to or want to move your school so that it's close to where you live. Another reason is you might want to move to a school that gives you the subjects of your choice. Yet another reason is, and this is a very common reason, that you might want to move to a more reputed school, which has more facilities, a better sports background, better track records, better faculty, and better results. Again, the character issue is another thing. Sometimes you might be asked to leave a school, and then it's very tricky because you then have to get a school that will take the child in, even though he might have a blemish on his character certificate. The other thing is that a lot of children move from a good day school into a good residential school. We saw a lot of this happen at the Doon because from very good day schools, you moved into a residential school. Yet, people also move for financial issues. You might not be able to afford the school you're in, so you want to go to another school. And lastly, there is this issue of domiciliary status or wanting to focus on studies. So you move from a residential school, which offers you a holistic education, into a school that's more like a crammer, because you want to make it to the medical or the engineering branch. There are schools in Delhi which our students went to simply because you wanted a pass certificate from a Delhi state so that you could make it to a Delhi medical college or an engineering college. And these, I think, are the reasons why children move and why movement may not be as easy and exciting as we thought it would be. Thank you very much for listening patiently. And over to you, Shubhayu. Hello?
So, just a second. I know Shubha is having some issues with the connectivity. Just give me a second.
Abhishek, can you hear me?
Yeah, Shubha, go ahead.
Yeah. I again apologize for all the connectivity issues at my end. Just one of those very bad Wi-Fi days. Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for me to your next speaker for today. Our next speaker is Achin Bhattacharyya. Achin is the founder and CEO of Notebook. He's a chartered accountant by training and was a director at Deloitte prior to starting Notebook. He has worked in India and abroad in various senior capacities in GE, PwC, KPMG, and Deloitte. Achin is an avid reader and a passionate traveler with a keen interest in economics, history, literature, and philosophy. He is a regular speaker at various forums and chambers of commerce and also contributes articles to numerous publications regularly. He is also on the board of some of the most renowned corporates and contributes significantly to their brand strategies. Achin, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Shubha, am I audible?
Yeah, Achin, I can hear you.
It gives me immense pleasure to welcome all of you again to today's session. Today, we are discussing a topic which leads to a complete change in the life of any child who undergoes this experience. Unless handled with utmost care, it can be unnerving not only for the student, but also for his or her parents. And although school and teachers have a huge role in making the transition smooth, it's grossly unfair to solely hold them accountable for any issues that may come up in the process. As all stakeholders need to do their bit to ensure smooth sailing. With an upwardly mobile young population, eager to make it big at a frantic pace, shifting base from one habitat to the other is more common than ever. In addition, government jobs, as Burrett sir mentioned, that require mandatory transfers after a certain tenure also calls for change of address every few years. However, before moving ahead with this, let me extend a very warm welcome to our esteemed panelists, who I'm sure will enlighten us with their views and real life experiences on this very interesting and sensitive topic. Now, in addition, we have school transfers originating from shifts from day school to residential or for other reasons like search for better learning outcomes. Now, when a fish, like I was very keenly watching Burrett sir's presentation, and I saw a slide, a fish trying to jump from one aquarium to the other. So when a fish is transferred, it requires a close matching of the water temperature and the pH values. Without such mapping, the fish's survival may at times become a question mark. If this is relevant for a fish, imagine how difficult the transfer process may be for a child. one who has just begun to adapt the various aspects of education, inclusive of peer pressure, multicultural issues, parental expectations, and comfort with teachers and subject-related specializations. However, kids seldom have a choice and need to move. Thus, very often, economic growth, in case of job changes, promotion, is given preference over other issues. However, we need to appreciate the fact that they also need to be aligned to the broader vision. And thus, it's important that they're spoken to rather than informing them on the 11th hour. There's no denying the fact that their little world changes completely. From an adult's perspective, at a macro level, the changes may not seem too big for them. But if we look at the same through a child's eyes, the shift is seismic. Unfamiliar new place, new home, missing old friends and teachers, and feeling singled out while walking into a classroom where the rest of the students may know and accept each other because of the long association, but may be extra formal or judgmental initially, may be very stressful for the child. A new student in a class is an opportunity for interaction for both the new and the old ones. And if facilitated smoothly by the school environment, can always turn out to be a win-win outcome for both the school and the student. But how do we plan the move? In order to make things easier for children, let us examine various factors. It's important to have a frank and detailed conversation with them so as to prepare the children mentally. One way, authoritative marching orders won't work in today's age. It's important to communicate well in advance and know their apprehensions and address them logically to the best extent possible. Chances of a smooth transition will be far more once children take it positively and look forward to embrace the change. Another very important aspect is to ensure that parents take adequate effort to reach out to the existing school and speak to the teachers to know more about the child's strength and development needs at the school. Very often, in spite of staying under the same roof, parents may not be aware to that extent. And it's important that they speak to the existing teachers. So as to start working on certain aspects, this will also ensure a proper debrief for the new school and teachers to the extent needed. If possible, take them for a tour of the new city and school before making the actual and final move so that they do not suffer from any anxiety or fear of unknown. Now, everyone wants to part on a good note and create lifetime memories. So can we throw a goodbye party and call all their friends and teachers to make it more memorable for them? It's really important to make the whole transition a positive experience. After shifting to a new place, can we give them a week or two before school starts to acclimatize themselves? Much like the base camp concept to the surroundings. After all, it may be too much of a change at too frantic a pace for the little ones. It's really important for parents to first time go to the new school with the child and if possible, take a tour together. This will give a sense of security to the child. Also, I think it's very important for parents to work closely with the teachers to make the whole experience as smooth and hassle-free as possible for the child. Thus, meeting up with the principal and teachers and briefing them transparently about your child will really help him or her to hit the ground running. Also, it's important to know the school's expectations, customs, and conventions so that your child is not out of place in any manner. Every institution has its own protocol and traditions. And once your child is a part of the heritage, he or she is expected to uphold the legacy and traditions. Now, the DNA of the institution may be deeply ingrained in the subconscious mind of other fellow students who may have inculcated many such habits as a way of life by virtue of number of years spent in the campus. But a new student may need to really take effort to bridge the gap. And all stakeholders, parents, teachers, new friends, have a role here in facilitating this. Many schools have a buddy concept. If possible, request one for your child. It will make his or her life much easier in school. I think it's really important to be hands-on parents. Once the child joins the new school, it's important to talk to him or her every day and know about how his day was and celebrates little achievements like making new friends, contributing to the school magazine, being selected for any sports team, and also ask his concerns. Now, giving him or her the comfort of bringing any kind of bullying or unacceptable behavior to your notice so that the parents may bring the same, discuss the same with teachers and school management. Also, I think it's really important to not stop him or her from being in touch with old friends. They may help him to cross the bridge in this phase. Also, if possible, it's important that parents find out as to what is going on from old friends and support him or her in the journey. Also, it's really important that we encourage the child to make new friends. It will definitely help. It will make the whole experience far better. He or she will feel at home. Again, encouraging extracurricular activities outside school is also important. It acts as a stress buster. And he or she understands that the city has much more to offer. Also an opportunity of making new friends. So I think it's really important to explain to the child that change is also an opportunity to start afresh without any perception baggage and to create a mark. So the whole experience has to be positive. I again thank all of you for giving me a patient hearing, and I look forward to hearing the views and the real life experience of our esteemed panelists. This is a very important and sensitive topic, and I'm sure that the discussion is going to be really engaging. Thank you. Over to you, Shubhayu.
Thank you, Achin. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. I'm sure between you and Burrett sir, we have now provided the perfect groundwork for our guest speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, our first guest speaker today is Ms. Mita Sharma. Ms. Sharma is the principal of the Mussoorie International School in Mussoorie. She is a distinguished educational leader with extensive experience both in India and internationally. Earlier, she was with the Maharaja Sawai Man Singh School, Jaipur, which she was leading as principal. And before that, she headed the Modi School in Sikar, Rajasthan, and All Girls Premier Institute. Her achievements at Modi School include starting the IBDP curriculum and laying foundation of a finishing school, Modi Academy of Manners and Etiquette, in collaboration with a reputed Canadian finishing school. Under her guidance, Modi School was awarded the affiliation to the Round Square International Organization by King Constantine of Greece at Switzerland. Besides these, she was involved in founding the international school at Karjat, Maharashtra. She has also spent several years with the Doon School as a teacher and headed the Department of Science. She has a postgraduate certification in education pedagogies from the Institute of Education, IOE, University College of London, UK. She is a gold medalist from Northeastern Hill University, Shillong, Meghalaya. She received formative education in Canberra, Australia. And in addition to these, she is a member of the National Training Panel for the International Award for Young People, IAYP, formerly called the Duke of Edinburgh Awards. Ma'am, it's a privilege to have you with us. Over to you.
Thank you, Shubhayu. Thank you for having me here. A very warm hello to all the people who are all over here are here, Mr. Barrett and Mr. Achin. I totally agree with all that you have said. I today would like to actually speak about my life. To begin with, it's got some similarities with what Mr. Barrett has said. I was baptized into the army at birth, which essentially means that I am a Fauji brat, like they call it, married to an army officer. I have undergone a shift of schools. I have undergone a shift of 9 schools in 12 years of schooling, which is immense in its own. And the major shift was shifting from Australia to India. As Shubhayu just said that my formative years were in Australia. So when I came back to India, in the wisdom of my parents, then they thought that maybe I would end up learning Hindi better by putting me into a Hindi medium school in Chandigarh, which totally boomeranged, and it hit me very hard. So that was one of the huge school transfers which I have experienced, and I'll speak more about it. But then I would also like to kind of in the same breath say that the similar kind of situation I try to curtail while I head this school, Mussoorie International School, which represents 27 nationalities. So coming back to my experience, when I came back, I spoke no word of Hindi. And like I said, my parents wanted me to learn Hindi, so they put me into a Hindi medium school. I faced total mockery. People made fun of me. I was not accepted for the way I spoke, the way I behaved, which was coming from a different kind of a culture. My parents were both working parents, and as a result, I hardly saw them when I was abroad. So it was just school and the people who were looking after us, me, my brother and sister, and that's it. So we ended up developing more of their cultural habits than the Indian cultural habits. And coming back to India, into the Indian cultural setting was a total disaster initially. I would have the girls of that particular school, which I joined, I would not like to take the name of this Hindi medium school, kind of walk up to me, make me sit down. And in fact, it was kind of bullying, whereby they would make me speak English because I spoke differently. Then I've lost my accent over the years. They made me do their homework. I would do homework for girls who were in grade 6 and 7 when I was only in grade 5. I ended up doing all their English homework, and I was being punished for being me for no fault of my own, because they say we do not choose our parents, we don't choose our relatives. We are born to them. It wasn't a choice of our making. And it was a great learning. And those days I was very young to make up that particular decision, but somehow, somewhere in my lifetime, I realized I would never let that happen to any other child in school. So acceptance and tolerance of people coming from different ethnicities. I was an Indian. I was not even from a different ethnicity for that matter. People coming from a different cultural setting, people speaking differently, people having a different value system is a must, which children do face when they transfer schools, even within India. Down from south to the north, or from the north to the east, we have such diversity within our own country. So
Ma'am, could you just turn on your camera? We're not able to see you.
You want to see me also? All right.
No. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So that was one of the instances that I remember, that which has really hit me hard as being, as transferring one school from the other. But besides that, if I actually, just a minute. Yeah, if I actually look into and I actually demarcate areas where school transfers really hit hard or they stand out in terms of being an advantage, I would first like to talk about academics. Academics, like Mr. Phillip Barrett also said, there is a difference. Now, whether in any class for that matter, for any child, every child has a different DNA, as Achin also said. And different schools are at different paces of learning. There have been times when I have shifted school and I found that, I am way ahead of what is being taught. Whereas there have been times when I found that I am way behind what is being taught. So the pace of the school instructions really mattered and really was advantageous at times and setback at other times. Now that called in for certain interventions at times and was certain plus point at other times. Thereafter, the next thing that strikes me was the learning styles You know, there are pros and cons of teaching a child by the style the child learns. Now, like even in the new education policy, they are saying that you must teach the child in the child's own mother tongue, for that matter. The mother tongue is one aspect of it, but the learning style, if a child learns more by doing, for that matter, and in your new school, you're taught more by other means, obviously there is a sense of loss. So there was definitely a sense of loss many a times when I shifted from one school to the other school. Different boards was also one of the huge problems. Now, different boards, for instance, even in India, we have the boards, the national boards. I'm not saying which board's better. There's no comparison in what I speak. But then boards have different amount of, there are some boards are content heavy, some boards are skill heavy, you know. So when you move from one board to the other, the advantageous bit was that over a period of time, we could cope up with whatever board we went into. However, initially there were problems. If they were skill heavy and we did not know those particular skills, we had to acquire those skills. Acquiring was definitely a positive point, but the time taken to acquire those skills when your entire class was way ahead of you really hit the self-esteem. You could be doing very well at one school, and suddenly, because you don't know these kind of skills, which are required by a particular board, you would hit, a little low in your confidence. We would bounce back. It is generally seen that children who actually have very often shifted school are highly, highly resilient. The continuity of learning does suffer, but it is their resilience and it is also the hard work of the parents who are constantly moving and who can actually give in time, who actually help them to cope up. Humility was a great lesson that I learned from my own mother. With a heart, which is as I said, I was a Fauji brat and married to a Fauji army officer's wife. So my heart would be brimming with nervous anticipation at all those dinner parties. There would be bad days when you would not want to attend a social event, but you would under compulsion go and attend that social event and put on a cheerful face at that party. However hard you may be frowning inside, because your child has an exam in school the next day, and you had, that feeling inside you that you're not doing justice to your child, where all mothers are actually helping the kid, prepare for the examination. So our kids, me, as well as all the other kids, we found that we got support, but not as much support as other people whose mothers were not married to army officers or married to the government services, or whose fathers were not into transferable jobs, which made us independent, for that matter. We ended up being more independent as compared to our peer. If you look into the time frame. Living out of the box had its own advantages. Shifting schools, yes, we had emotional setbacks. These days, schools have programs called the social and emotional aspects of learning, where children are assessed socially and emotionally. In my time, we had no such programs in school. To strike new friendships and to actually get into a group which had studied right from grade 1 to grade 6, and suddenly you come into grade 6 and you also want to be friends with them, was not easy. One had to really be modest, prove herself to get into those groups. Yes, we had keen social skills which we had developed because of being in the forces, we had a sense of discipline, but the social anxiety also played up. While we shifted schools, there was a separation anxiety, not just being separated from your schoolmates, your teachers, but frankly speaking, this is a little, it may put a smile onto some faces. I remember the first time, in my remembrance, when a fridge was sold out because we were shifting and I had to go to a new school and a new place for my father. I was so attached to that blue colored fridge. I still can't, it took me a very long time to get over just a fridge, because it was something that probably I associated my continuity of the past few years. Imagine if that could do what it did to me then. How would a child who's just 11 to 12 years relate to just changing the complete environment? There was grief, there was loss at losing people. Frankly, there was the acceptance and tolerance did come in, but it did come in with a cost. So I was asked when I would walk into some school, or there are certain schools I was asked, oh, well, your dad is in the army. Well, does he have an AK-47? Does he shoot? You know, and, you know, if in a conversation, I would speak up and say, my dad is busy today, he's gone for firing. They would actually take firing to be literally firing, not just a practice session of firing. We were, so basically, we really, if I speak about myself, I really do not relate to friends too much. I do not recall any of my school friends much. I've hardly spent like a year or two with each one of them. So there has been no continuity in friendships. There's been no continuity in terms of the teachers who taught me, which has left an impact on my mind. As a grown-up, when I'm asked who was your best friend, who was your best teacher, there's so many who may come to my mind, but there is not a single one. Like, people stick on to sayings that so-and-so taught me for so many years. There were times when we shifted schools that we felt like outsiders. We missed our beloved activities, old friendships, and there were difficulties in schoolwork, like I have mentioned. So besides all of that, but there was a sense of secularism, there was a sense of patriotism, which was inherently inculcated in us from the families that we came in. And we brought that spirit of secularism, patriotism, and discipline into the schools that we went into. You know, they say that each one in the peer teaches each one something in the group. We probably ended up teaching those people discipline. We ended up teaching secularism. We taught them respect and humility. We taught them how to live life, because that is what we learned while changing schools. We could not give it up. You know, you could either, like they say, a ship is made either to sink or sail. Sinking was not an option. We had to sail. We had to somehow, you know, kind of keep going, keep being at it. And like they say, that if ifs and buts were candies and nuts, every day would be Christmas. We did try making everyday Christmas despite all the hardships that we had. There were problems, there was happiness, there was discomfort, and yet there was a lot of learning in transferring schools. At times, education suffered. At times, school was not the only source of education. I remember living on the banks of the Indira Gandhi Canal in Abohar, in those makeshift kind of huts, because the land belonged to the Indian government and not to the army. We didn't have really good schools there. So the education suffered over there. We didn't have great teachers, but yet we went to school. So the quality educators were not there at times. The class sizes were too big in certain schools. The social life and relationships with the school had to be recultivated. You know, you had to prove yourself that you were worth it. Now, having said all of this, I also believe that the transferring of schools affects different children differently. So there are kids who really thrive on transferring schools. You know, the flip side of this is that if you have really done something very wrong in your school, people being people, teachers being teachers, they're all human. They try to stigmatize mistakes. You know, you cannot hang. One of my old headmasters said, you cannot hang the same boy twice for the same mistake, right? And people, it's natural and a humanistic tendency. We would be saints if we would all say that we don't do it. People do have baggages. And if you continue in the same school for a very long time, it is also seen that they remember, they do not forget. And they say, oh, in so-and-so year you did this. Oh, in so-and-so year you did this. For us, it never happened. We kept moving. Nobody knew about the skeletons in our cupboards. And we could strike a new front. It was a fresh slate for us to write our story. We could make new choices at cost of many other things that we had left behind. But they were privileged times and not so privileged times while, shifting schools. Now, if I move on to the skill bit of it, like they say these days, that we are really not, we live in this volatile, ambiguous, uncertain world, a complex world, whereby we are not even sure of what we are preparing our children for. Nobody had anticipated COVID. Nobody had anticipated so much of online learning. I would have probably not been talking to you people, talking about my experiences of shifting one school to the other school. So this came very readily to us, adapting to the new situation, which is a huge skill. We have seen children who score 99% marks. Some of them make it to those competitive examinations, and yet they do not end up getting great jobs. But we had the skills, which the employers actually looked for. And that was by virtue of shifting schools. I'm not saying that if you don't shift schools, you don't have those skills. But these skills came to us naturally because for us, it was the do or die spirit. We had to adapt. We had to settle down. We had to make a difference. We did not have a choice. We were risk takers. So shifting schools was actually huge risk taking, not for our parents, but for us also. We were fun loving. We enjoyed every bit of it. There are kids who really do not like changing schools and they're so attached to their peers and their teachers, But what is the fun if there is no spice in life is my philosophy. We were leaders. We were leaders in making, and most of us have ended up leaders in life also. And these transfer of schools actually gave us those leadership, that we kind of got that skill of being a leader through this. We learned from various aspects of life, from various places, various cultures. And when we moved into a school in a different setting with a different ethos, we brought freshness to the school. And as a result, they found us different and they looked up to us. I mean, well, the difference could be either ways, positive or negative for that matter. Again, it depends upon child to child. The transfer of schools also led us to become problem solvers. We had to figure out a solution. We knew that we had to survive. The survival instincts were so sharp because of this frequent transfer of schools. A lot of experiential learning took place for us. So what I would like to say is there are a lot of positives and negatives about transferring schools, a lot of grief and loss. And there are a lot of ways, like Achin said, that can be, utilized. Intervention can happen. Those who do not settle down can settle down. But I believe that the positives are more than the negatives. Believe me, as a head of school, when I say so, till grade 1 to 5, even in my own school, I do not stress beyond English and mathematics. I really do not, because I feel that from grade 1 to 5, these are two languages. Math is also a language. And if you can master these two languages, you will learn how to learn for the rest of your life. So we, by virtue of shifting schools, learned how to learn. What do I say now? So if I actually, sum it down and I have to speak in a nutshell, I would say, personally speaking, I got a lot of independence. It came hard initially, but thereafter I started looking for shifting schools. It just became, yeah, Dad, what's happening? It's been 2 years, that kind of an attitude. Even today, it hasn't gone out of me. I still look forward. I've shifted already 2 schools, 3-4 years, and I want to move out because I start feeling stagnated at a place. Now, this is probably not the mindset of many of those who have never shifted. But if you have tasted shifting, and you've liked it, and you have learned from it, benefited it, and more so, if the mission of the school that you are shifting into resonates with the mission of learning for your own self as well as for your parents, it's a wonderful amalgamation of choice that you have made. So this has led me to be fearless. This has led me to be a woman of integrity. It has led me to learn a lot of culture, which I've probably not have learned had it been in one particular, had I stayed in one particular school. Every school has an ethos, has a tradition and a culture which cannot be mirrored by another school. As a teacher, if I just move on towards from being a student to a teacher, there is a lot of professional development that also happens when teachers also shift schools for that matter. So I would like to say that shifting of schools personally has been very, very good to me. It's really, really been good to me. There are a lot of issues with people who are unable to adapt. And so like they say, every person has a choice to make about shifting, but if your father is in a transferable job, probably you do not have that choice. You have to do it. So if you have to do it, you might as well enjoy it and make the best of it. That's what I would like to end with, that whether it's a day school, whether it's a residential school, life is tough. And as an educator, learning from my first school experience, I am set to ensure that shifting of schools for children who come into boarding, now that I head a boarding school, should be, at a level where there is no discomfort for them. It is up for us educators to ensure that we look into the social and the emotional aspect of this transfer of schools. We look into connecting with them. We look into finding what is best in them, promote that, and make them, recognizable. They have within the school community. Once that little appreciation comes in, they start excelling in almost everything. So there is a huge role that the school has to play when transfers take place. There is a huge role that the parents have to play while transfers take place. But the onus ultimately of learning rests with the child and the DNA of the child. So there is no fixed rule. Whether it's going to be great for a kid or not great for a kid, some are going to excel and some may have an initial setback, but the human nature is such that they will all bounce back. And in the bigger scheme of things, a few months really does not make much of a difference. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for being here. And while I'm sure Achin would do a much better summary of your speech, I think all of us here who have had some amount of shifting to deal with have all remembered our blue fridges with your reference. I think that is something that hit home with a lot of us, which is my segue into our next speaker. We have somebody else for you who's also from very, very closely interlinked with an army background. Our next guest speaker is Mrs. Anita Bahadur. Mrs. Anita Bahadur is a freelance consultant with over 25 years of experience in business communication and personality development training. A lifelong association with the defense services has helped her acquire and impart skills that lead to positive thinking, motivation, leadership, and team building. A dynamic speaker, trainer, presenter, and a published author, Anita is skilled in employing clarity, innovation, and humor to deliver effective presentations to a large variety of audiences at different organizational levels. Anita is speaking examiner certified by the University of Cambridge for the Cambridge English for Speakers of Other Languages ESOL examinations, which English Certificate BEC, a consultant trainer with the Center for Assessment Evaluation and Research. She has been associated with the Cengage Learning. She has been a resource person with Encyclopedia Britannica and trained in Cambridge English, conducted workshops on motivation and time management for Tata Teleservices Limited and HCL Technologies. She has conducted programs on communications and confidence building for officer cadets at the Indian Military Academy and the CRPF. She's conducted train the trainer sessions for personality development and life skills, several corporates, business schools, and vocational institutes, and conducted workshops on life armed forces forums. Ma'am, it's a privilege to have you with us. Over to you.
Thank you, Shubayu. Thank you so much. And a very good evening to all the people who are attending this webinar. Where do I start? So I feel that between Ma'am Mita Sharma and Sir Burrett, they've said it all. Because as an army brat, I would like to use the word brat here. As an army brat, I have gone through very similar experiences as Ma'am Sharma and Mr. Bharat spoke. So here, if you can see, are pictures of a lot of army brats. And what is the, brat is like an acronym. What does it stand for? Born, raised, and transferred. So essentially, look at all these people. And these are just, in the so-called showbiz world. There are army children who are doing extremely well in life, in many areas of life. Even in this picture, if you see, there is this gentleman, and I forget his name. I'm very bad with names, I'm sorry, but he is heading Vodafone. There is Sabir Bhatia, who started hotmail.com, and he is again an army brat. There is Jeev Milkha Singh, who is an eminent golfer, and so many more. So what I would like to say to start it all off is that as children who have had to transfer, to move from station to station, these are people who chalk their own path. They are the ones who are making a success story out of life. I think they have, as Ma'am Sharma said, there is so much positive in when you get transferred from place to place. You have resilience, you become versatile. And these are guys that have done this. They have transferred, they have sort of utilized all of that, all of the skills they developed to make a path for themselves. And this is not in showbiz alone, like I said earlier, it is in all walks of life. So let me just talk very briefly a little bit about my own background. I am a naval daughter. So born to the Navy, so to speak. I am a naval daughter. I married an army man, and I have a son who is also an army man. So he is right now, a lieutenant colonel in the army. So it's literally 3 generations of the army that I have experienced. And as a naval daughter, what I really found was that I loved every day of my life. We stayed a long time in Navy Nagar in Kolaba. The houses, the culture, everything that we learned there. And yes, I did transfer schools. What was difficult for me was that when I transferred, so up to about grade 8, I was in one school in Mumbai. My father got posted to a place called Jamnagar, which is in Gujarat. I was in another convent school over there, which was again wonderful. Now in Bombay, I was in the Maharashtra board school. Transferred to Gujarat, it was the Gujarat board. And then my father was posted to Delhi. And that was where disaster struck. Because in Delhi, I joined the Air Force School. And over there, suddenly I had to shift from the state board kind of schools to the CBSE board. Interestingly, at that time, the state board did not have the +2 system. I was the last of the batches just before +2 was introduced into our education system. So I did the 11th standard. And at that time, the +2 system was not there, but CBSE had the system where in grade 9, you chose your stream. And I came to the school in grade 10. and I had to choose a stream. Now, I was doing extremely well over there, 100 on 100 in maths and great marks in science. So obviously, I took the science and maths stream. And it was very difficult. I know how I struggled. I hated bio because we had to go into the lab and dissect those frogs and things, and that made me squeamish. But given that, up to that point of time, I was a happy child till I was in Jamnagar. I was a happy child. I think a lot of things that happened when I was growing up, apart from the school transfers, was the overall experience that we had when we were living in these different places, which is also a part of education, I feel. See, education is not just what you learn in schools. And I think why all these army brats have made it to a certain status, a certain position, or just been successful in what they do is essentially because they have learned what is not taught in school. Social skills are developed, and we all learn to put up a front, like ma'am said. You know, even if you're not up to it, you go to that party, you attend the party, you smile, you talk, you put up that front, and our children learn it too. So that is one part of it. Now, when we came to Delhi, my brother, who's about 6 years younger to me, was in grade, I think he was in grade 5 or so. And from grade 5 to grade 12, he studied in the same school. So his experience and mine are poles apart. And these are things that I would like to highlight here. That, you know, if you think about it, having to change, having the transfers was great till a certain point. Maybe up to, say, grade 7, you can do that. But I would suggest that grade 7, grade 8 onwards, if children can find stability in one school, they have the time to settle down. They have the time to adapt to various learning styles. That's another thing that was being spoken about. The various learning styles that children, you know, have to change. So in one school, there is a certain methodology of teaching. In another school, it changes entirely. As a 4G brat, as a kid, as a 4G kid, uh, never went to KVs, never went to even army schools, went mostly to convent schools, except for the last 2 years at the Air Force School. And at that point, and even today, the Air Force School is considered one of the better schools in Delhi or in our country. So that particular experience, you know, I've really not had to go to KVs, etc. So that was something that, you know, so I think, you know, sometimes when what I would like to really talk about is that at KVs or at army schools, what does happen? So at army schools, children from a similar background come into those schools and they are taught by a lot of teachers. A lot of their teachers are army wives. And here I would like to bring in the teacher perspective. So as an army wife, and as a teacher who was teaching in an army school or even in other schools, what I found was that I was a lot warmer with my children when students came in. So what typically happens in a regular school is that when students come in midterm, then you know, they find it difficult to adapt. But as an army wife, I understood that. And so did all the army wives that were there in those army schools. In fact, even in the public schools in different areas, a lot of the you know, the A1 schools in most cities where there were army camps liked to take in army officers' wives as teachers, because army officers' wives brought this freshness to the school. Like Mita Sharma ma'am said, they brought their discipline, they brought all of the, you know, the style, the discipline, the culture, the class, all of that was brought into the school by these army teachers. And therefore, I feel that as an army wife who was also a teacher, I sort of understood how the children felt, where they were coming from, and I could help them to adapt. I could give them personal attention, which is something that, so I was talking to my son yesterday about this very thing. And it's very interesting. I asked him why, what did you feel about being transferred from one school to the other? He's changed about 6 schools in all his, maybe 7 or 8 actually, in his school time. And I said, how did you feel about it? And the funny part is, he said, Mom, I never thought that it was an option. He says, for us, that was life. For us, it was part of being. We never knew that we could study in one school from, say, from KG to grade 12. He says, for us, the option was never there. We understood that we have to move after 2 years, and obviously we will change schools, and everyone changes schools. So what's the big deal? They took it in their stride. They went from school to school. And because of all the other skills that they had learned, and in the army, there are lots of skills that children pick up. Because of those skills, they could make a mark even in 2 years. Wherever they went, they did make a mark. The fantastic thing about army life is that it gives you a lot of exposure to extracurricular activities, sports, games, and other such stuff. So what happens is that what children then do is that they become strong and they become versatile. So they are playing games. They have so many games. They can choose a game they want to play. So they're playing games. They become they are exposed to the grand outdoors. They learn from nature. So while the transfers are happening, they're also learning from all of these things. And yesterday I actually spent a while ringing up some of my children's friends and some of my own friends who were army brats and who are now army wives slash teachers, or who have been. And the interesting part is that most of them said we wouldn't have changed it for anything else. So because when you go from school to school, what happens with the transfers is that you learn to adapt. You become strong. You become versatile. I used the word jugadu with one of these children that I was talking to, and she said, yeah, well, I think versatile is a better word, I think, to describe what we call in Hindi jugadu, making the best of what you have. Yes, there are children who face, find it very difficult. So I would say that a lot of us are outgoing and extroverts. And for those kind of children, it's great. They are happy. Every 2 years, they are like itching to get transferred. Okay, so where are we going next? So what's the next thing to do? So for those children, they actually become stronger, they become versatile, they become more extrovert. For the children who are quieter, who are shy, it takes a while to adapt. But I think a lot of army kids go through with this thinking, oh, we have no option, so we have to do it. And in the long run, I think it helps. So there was a lot of stuff that was spoken about, the negatives of transfers. I would like to dwell a little more on the positives. So that is what army children learn, or children who even have transferable fathers or parents in transferable jobs. They learn how to adapt easily. And there is a lot of experience, there's a lot of awareness that comes into their whole experience of going from place to place. uh, they enjoy nature firsthand. They are outdoors a lot more than our children who grew up in bigger cities. I will not say this about rural areas. I think in rural areas, children still do go outdoors a lot, but the culture is changing gradually. And even today, when army children go into the cantonment areas, they are more secure. They have the ability to go out to learn from outside, from nature. So while school transfers have their challenges, I would like to say that they learn from all these experiences. So when my son was very tiny, we were going by something that is called a special train that sort of transports a whole unit from point A to point B. And we were on that train journey for 11 days. During that time, he went into the engine. He sat with the engine driver. He understood what was happening there. He was, I think, just about 3 years old. But that was an experience he still remembers. So this kind of experiential learning is something that is, I mean, the transfers are there, yes, but this is also something that makes army kids very, very versatile, very, very rich in life's experiences. And they, like I said earlier, they learn to take life as it comes. So they know they have to go on a transfer and they take it in their stride. What I would really like to say is that if allowed to, children can adapt and children are more resilient than we give them credit for. So when they go from school to school or from station to station, they learn to take it in their stride. They learn to uh, just, to adapt. And that is something fantastic, I think, that happens in transfers. There's a lot of cultural exposure. They are at least bilingual. So a lot of children I spoke to said, they know a smattering of Marathi, they know a smattering of Punjabi, someone even picked up Malayalam or Tamil. Of course, it also depends on your aptitude for language. So though I stayed in Bombay and I stayed in, I stayed in Hyderabad for a bit, but I could not really pick up the languages there because I do not have the aptitude, but that is from person to person. They learn to build relationships quickly. And that is another thing they said. They said, wherever we go, we find an old friend, someone who studied with us even in grade 4 or 5, and we can catch up with them right where we left off. And a relationship builds even then. They learn to do these things. Uh, Definitely, they learn to be independent. Again, that is something that Mita Sharma ma'am also pointed out, that children learn to be independent because they are left a lot of times to their own resources. I want to add to this that I, being an army officer's wife, I mean, when we got transferred from place to place, what I like to, I maybe, what I like to think is that uh, even though sometimes the schools were not as good as they could have been, or the teaching staff was not as good as it could have been, I felt that a lot of times what we gave them at home was something that made them, made the transitions easier. So I felt that we were there for them, waiting to, nurture them along, pushing them in the right direction, and helping them as they went. Of course, they were also doing that. Children also learn to be street smart in a way. See, an army life or in these transfers, most of the children who are in, who have parents in transferable jobs are usually government servants. So even if it's railways or if it's the civil services, they go from one environment to a similar second environment a lot of times. And over there, they are very protected in many ways. But when they transfer from school to school, it also teaches them to be street smart, to look out for themselves, to look out for their siblings or for other army brats in their groups. So they learn to be street smart in those ways. And the new beginnings is another thing. So, when I do my teacher training classes, I often talk about how teachers do not forgive. If a child, for example, in grade 1 or 2 has a little bit of a reputation, in grade 2, I have this grade 2 class and I have a set of children. When they go to grade 3, this set of children, the teacher who's got the same section in grade 3 comes to me and she says, ma'am, tell me about your students. And I say, oh, ABC are, excellent in studies. DEF are responsible children. You can give them responsibility. G is very naughty. And so the grade 3 teacher gives lots of responsibility to DEF. She's very happy with the academic levels of ABC. And whatever G does, G is naughty. By the time G reaches grade 5, he or she has a reputation as being that awful naughty child. We do not forgive. But when you get transferred out, it's a new beginning. You have a clean slate. You can start again. And believe me, when children are have learned to adapt, they also learn very quickly to make their marks. I had to study, I had to work really hard when I went into grade 10 in the Air Force School. So I pretty much was just nose to the grind. I had to get there, otherwise, I would not. So maybe I missed out on some of it. But even then, I did make my mark. I was into debating, I did do some things. And this new beginnings is what helps these brats. A friend of mine gave me another angle. She said, you know what? We went with this viewpoint that, we're going to be out of there in 2 years. Let's take some risks. Let's do some things that might be naughty. It doesn't matter. We'll move on. So let's take risks. Let's do things and let's enjoy our school life. So there is new beginnings also. Another thing that I would like to talk about, when children are in these kind of situations where they get posted a lot, they stop stereotyping. A lot of people, when they stay in one place, they tend to stereotype people who are from another place. So very often when I go to the south, for example, I'm from the north, and when I go to the south for my trainings, a lot of times, the teachers there say, you North Indians, da, da, da. Or a lot of North Indians feel that these South Indians, da, 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 or people from the East, as people or children who have experienced so many transfers, we stop stereotyping. We understand that people are different, and that's the fantastic part. Because people are different, they are interesting. So the Maharashtrians have a certain culture. In the Punjab, there is another culture. In Bengal, it's a third culture, and so on. And it's okay with us. We understand. And we are happy to try and adopt as much of that. We stop thinking of people like that. We stop stereotyping. And as a result, we become more secular. We are happy to accept everything. Another beautiful thing about the army is, the place of worship. We celebrate all festivals of all religions together. And we learn to do it with as much reverence as we do for our own religion. And that, I think, is a huge teaching. In fact, I think everyone should have some experience of serving in the army, because I think that makes people realize the importance even of life. And that is something that I would like to talk about. I mean, that I really feel very strongly about. So it makes us secular. We are patriotic. We are people who love our country and would not exchange it. So that is what this does. As a teacher, like I said earlier, we start understanding the needs of our children whose parents are in transferable jobs. Here's another thing that I would like to talk about. As a parent who's obviously, as a parent where we are in a transferable job, the thing that we decided to do was that we never moved mid-semester. And I think the government allows for that. I don't think if for example, the father gets transferred mid-term, the government allows you to retain accommodation, you are allowed to complete that particular term. So it's not as if you are being uprooted mid-session to be thrown. That now again is a choice that you have to make. So you are allowed to do that. You are allowed to move. Now, when you accept, as a teacher, you accept that these children are coming from varied backgrounds. In fact, in army schools, there's a lot of socio-economic difference in the children who are coming. There is the Jawan's child who has come from a village to come and study here, and there is the officer's child. But what I have found is that nobody discriminates, nobody even thinks about it. They are a bunch of children I have to teach. I do not look into what their fathers do, what rank their fathers are at. I accept them as a student, a child who needs my help. So as a teacher and as maybe as a 4G brat, I have learned this. I have learned that, it's okay. There are all kinds of people from all strata, and we have to learn to adapt. Here, I would like to give an example of a very, one of my friends was talking about this, a very high end school. In grade 4 or 5, suddenly the school management decided that, the children needed to be shuffled. So their sections A, B, C, and D, and they decided that when children came into grade 4, they would shuffle the children. A child from grade A would go to C, and they would absolutely shuffle them around. There was instances of bedwetting. There were instances of, parents coming, children being traumatized. Why? Because they had left their friends behind in another section of the same school. Our children never had any of those traumas. Yes, they had to adapt, sorry. They did it. They did it because they were thrown in at the deep end. And today's day and age, I feel sometimes that we mollycoddle our children a little too much. On that note, I would also like to talk about, so again, some of my children's friends, especially young ladies. I was talking to one who has 2 children now. She's an army officer's wife. She was an army daughter. She's an army officer's wife, and she has her 2 children. She says now today's children are more sensitive. They are more aware. The children are young, they're 8 and 10, but they feel the pinch a lot more. She says, we never thought about it. We never thought about academics. We never thought about how difficult it would be to change schools. We looked forward to it and we were happy to go on. Our parents never stressed us about what our grades were. She says, I as a parent don't stress my children. But the school culture has changed so that parents are so competitive, that grades have become important, marks have become important. So these young children come back and they say, when we change schools, our grades will suffer. We'll have to make new friends. So maybe it's also the mindset of people who are changing. So she says, for my children, I have to be extra sensitive. I am thinking now of settling in one place so that my children do not have to have the trauma of changing schools. But having said that, I would still suggest that, if you are a parent who is in a transferable job, give the child the benefit of having both parents around for as long as is possible, because that is an enriching experience. So go with them. Allow the child, maybe till about grade 6 or grade 7, be there, be both parents be there. And then, yes, maybe from grade 7 or grade 8 onwards, it would be a good idea to settle in one place, allow the child, to develop. Now, when a lot of children change schools at grade 10 because they want to go to a different school for various reasons, I think Mr. Burrett had spoken about those reasons. It could be the neighborhood, it could be the reputation of the school, it could be a certain kind of format that a school follows. For example, your schools which are more focused on academic learning, if you have to prepare for the medical field or for engineering, etc. So there are several reasons why children change from grade 10 to into grade 11. Now, I had a student who changed from a co-ed school in grade 10 and went into an all-girls school in grade 11. For her, it was liberating. She says, I don't have to worry about the length of my skirt. I don't have to worry if, if my button is open. She says, in this all girls school, I have that freedom. I'm not always looking over my shoulder to see who is staring at me. So I think transferring from school to school is something that all children experience at least once or twice in their lifetime. And for every child, it is a different interpretation. For every child, it is, learning as they go. Sometimes life throws lemons at you. In the forge, we say when that happens, we make lemonade. We get this, we get to live in barracks, like ma'am said, on the bank of the Indira Gandhi Canal. And those are temporary those, you know, it's temporary accommodation. We cover our trunks with pretty sheets and we put some flowers there, and it still becomes a beautiful home. So everyone has to learn, and I think it's an individual thing for every child. The important thing is to stay in touch with the children, talk to them, ask them what their needs are, ask them if they are comfortable, try and help them when they are not comfortable. So, as parents, you have to stay there. Having said that, as a working parent, I feel I gave more attention to my children than did a lot of mothers who did not have the pressure of having to attend a 4G party in the evening, etc. There are mothers like that, and yet the children do not get the attention. At the end of the day, I find that a lot of those children are still sitting in front of the television set. You as parents have to set the rules. They are not allowed television for more than half an hour, 1 hour, maybe one particular serial or something or program that they watch. They should not be allowed cyber time. They should not be allowed so much of time with their tablets. It's more difficult today because there's a lot of online learning that is happening. But at the end of the day, that's what I feel. So here's my take on the whole thing. Wouldn't exchange it for anything. It's a great life, and children learn to adapt. I'll say thank you on that note. Thank you very much, everyone, for giving me a patient hearing. Good evening.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us for this. It was wonderful hearing your take on this whole situation from both the students and the teachers' perspective. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time to introduce our next guest speaker. Our next guest speaker is Pooja. She is currently the HR lead of India sales of Red Hat. She has 16 plus years of experience in senior HR roles at Prestige and Samsung Electronics. She graduated from the St. Stephen with an MBA in HR from the New Delhi Institute of Management. Over to you.
Thank you for that introduction, and very good evening, everyone. I would.
Pooja ma'am, are you there?
Yeah, Shubha, we can see you. Go ahead, Pooja.
Can you hear me? Oh,
Yeah, we can hear you.
wonderful.
Go ahead.
All right. So, a very good evening to everyone, and I would like to start by saying that this was a very enriching last 1 hour, and I got to learn so much from everyone's personal experiences, their stories, their personal stories. And you know, it brought back a lot of memories in my head, and I could relive those moments. So so let me quickly start by saying that you know, my dad, he started his career with border security force. So right from Jammu and Kashmir to Uttarakhand to Assam, Meghalaya, Chennai. So he eventually moved to a government job, of course, ONGC, and he retired as head of HR. So I have that in my blood, and that's why I'm also in HR somewhere. So yeah, I changed about 9 schools. And when I was in college, and when I heard from my friends that, you know, they were in the same school right from first grade to the 12th standard, I was like, oh my God, this really happens. And because I like you know, other speakers, other panelists have pointed out that it becomes way of life. And I was that kid that who would look forward to these transfers, because, you know, they came along with air flights, staying in a 5-star hotel for like 15 days. I would get to swim, and so many perks, and I would meet new friends. You know, so I guess yeah, like, you know, every coin has a flip side, I would say. But for me, I would feel that it gave a holistic development to my personality. I would say that I could I became so high on adaptability, because I had changed so many schools. Although, you know, I was with my family, And I remember that at the time of my graduation, so when I made it to St. Stephen's, and I had to stay as a, as a residence in a hostel. I couldn't believe it that, I'm not going to be with my family, but it took me no time. And, you assimilate so well, you adapt to new, you become so versatile. And for me, that gave me an exposure being in different schools. It gave me a different exposure to different culture, different values, different social norms. And for me, it became very easy to adapt to those. Changing different schools also meant that I was exposed to different learning styles. And during my time, I wish we had the experiential learning around, because when I read about it, when I experience the different the wow factors of experiential learning, I always tell myself that, hey, I wish we had this in our schools. But having said that, changing of schools, I did not see it as a hindrance at all. But I would say yes, for people who, for students, because you're at a very young stage of your life, young phase of your life. It depends a lot on your personality, what kind of personality type you are. And if you have the right attitude, if you have that fire in the belly to learn, to grow, to thrive in the new environment, I think then there's no stopping you. And being in the HR space, I would say that when we hire, we always look for these competencies. Whether are you adaptable? Will you adapt to the new organization culture? Will it be easy for you? Will you collaborate with people? Because we heard multiple times that when you change schools, you become good at relationship building with your communication. You become an extrovert. It's so easy for you to strike a conversation and build on your relationships, all in all. So I would say even in the corporate world, this is valued, because you're outgoing, you're accepting, you're adapting, you're flexible. So flexibility is also one of the corporate competencies that is highly valued. So when you're changing schools, it kind of molds you in a way that you're flexible, you adapt, you learn to grasp and absorb new things, new learnings very, very easily. And I would say that it also made me very disciplined. I especially when in Delhi, when I was all by myself for 5 years, graduating and post graduating, I had to manage my own finances, everything. So I was well prepared. I think changing of schools and everything kind of prepared me for my college days. And then I was ready for the corporate world. So so I think all in all, I would like to just summarize saying that I think I would definitely like to touch upon this bit, that the kind of exposure you get in different schools. So in one of the school, I picked up table tennis. Then another school, I picked up swimming, and I was getting ace at it. And then I got into martial arts and dramatics. I didn't know this side of me, that I didn't even realize. So this gives you a holistic development. And I wouldn't say that if you continue to stay in the same school, you wouldn't have that. I think today, all schools, every student, they're super invested in their learning, in their growth, and they're going the extra mile. So I'd like to sum up my discussion by saying that if a student has the right attitude and the desire to learn, I think half of the battle is won. So with that, thank you very much for your time, and I'll hand it over to the host. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pooja. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you. Perhaps this was perhaps the best way to close this discussion, because you put on screen what happens when the student transfers multiple schools and goes on to make a brilliant corporate career for himself or herself. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the speaking sessions. I would now like to invite Achin back for the vote of thanks. Achin, over to you.
Yes, really great session we had, but it's a wonderful presentation. And I really, hats off to your spirit. The fact that you took the trouble of coming in and didn't miss a single session speaks volumes about your courage and resilience. And indeed, it is an example for all of us. Ms. Mita Sharma, wonderful presentation. I was listening very carefully to you. Shifting school from Australia to India and straight away into a Hindi medium in UP. Indeed, very unique experience, a case study in itself. And some very important points you made, ma'am, which I think are very relevant. Small incident that you shared really connects with all of us. Shifting places, of course, known ambience makes us feel comfortable. The sight of blue color fridge being sold off, we could very much connect to it. So I think some very important points you made, and the benefits, the kind of sense of secularism, patriotism, discipline, respect, humility, very, very important aspects. And I think very rightly you mentioned, if ifs and buts would be candles and nuts, every day would be Christmas. I think couldn't agree more. So undoubtedly, we completely understand and agree with you on the aspect that whether it be your survival instincts, problem solving skills, undoubtedly the kind of flexibility that change of schools has brought in has helped. Ms. Anita Bahadur, wonderful introduction slide. Great to see army brats doing wonderful in each and every aspect of life. I think some great points you made, both from the perspective of students as well as teachers, which I'm sure are takeaways for our esteemed educators. Ms. Pooja, Anand, thank you so much for coming in at a short notice. Really appreciate that. And I think some very good points you made, especially with regard to holistic development of a child. So whether it be martial art or dramatics or sports, changing of schools, I'm sure has helped you for your college days and corporate career ahead. So I think we really had a great session, some very interesting, thought-provoking discussions. It was wonderful. I thank all members of the audience for taking their time out and being with us here today. In fact, your support has kept us going session after session. And I look forward to seeing all of you again in our next webinar. Thank you, take care, and goodbye.